Good morning, everyone. So, today we will continue our discussion for module number 2 in General Biology 2. So, our topic is about transport in animals. Here are the objective. So, at the end of our discussion, you are able to compare the circulation in simple and complex animal. You can identify the parts and function of human circulatory system. And lastly, you can trace how blood circulates in the human body. So here are the terminologies that you should be familiarized. First is the blood vessels. Blood vessels are the channels or conduits through which blood is distributed to body tissue. Second is lungs. Lungs are a pair of spongy air-filled organs that is located on either side of the chest or our thorax. We have the capillaries. Those are the tiniest blood vessels containing structures that connect arterioles and venules. That they are the smallest and the most abundant form of blood vessels in human body. And lastly is the heart. Heart pumps blood through the network of arteries and veins. So let's start. Transportation in plants and animal. So the transportation in plants and animal are very different. So as you can see, the comparison, the transport system in animals consists of several organs such as the heart, including the respiratory system, different blood vessels. On the other hand, we have vesicles, the xylem and phloem in plants. So the common function of nourishing of cells and supply basic needs are the similarities between the transport system of plants and animal. So both of these processes provide cells with hormones, nutrients, and gases in essential to the growth and development of both plants and animals. So even though they have different structures, different anatomy, they share similar function. So let's start with the transport in simple animals. So in simple animals like sponges, cnidarians, the gas exchange happened between the water from the environment and the circulatory body fluid in the organism. So in sponges, water just passes through a series of chambers of their body known as spongicoil, that the central cavity where enough gas exchange happen directly in the cell, just like what we've discussed on the respiratory system. So they consist of cells that are directly diffuses oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that will be transported throughout the different part of their cells. In the Daryan, such as Hydra, each cell is directly in contact with external environment or the gastrovascular cavity, since the body wall is only one cell thick. So as you can see, here are the organelles responsible for direct diffusion of nutrients, specifically the oxygen and carbon dioxide that happens for the transport system in simple organism. And we have some terrestrial animals such as roundworms. So they are the pseudocolumnates. The body fluid is used for circulation. So they don't have a blood vessels, just a false cavity. This is accomplished by the movement of the body against the fluid that is direct in contact with tissue and organ. That's why most of the worms or earthworms, which is considered as a roundworm, they live in a moist soil. Therefore, the moist soil will provide enough oxygen from enough oxygen for them to survive. So, oxygen from air goes into the soil, which Thin mucus coated skin is the respiratory surfaces or their gas exchange across the skin. So if the skin dries, they also can be suffocated. Now, let's proceed to the main topic, which is the transport system in complex animal, which is we're going to focus on human. So we have an open and closed circulatory system. Okay, so please observe the difference between the two type of circulatory system. So as you can observe, both of them have heart, arteries, veins, and valve. But open circulatory system have an ostia and open arteries. So it is a open circulatory system because the blood can direct uh, flow or transported with the holes or known as the ostia throughout their circulatory system. While the closed circulatory system, it doesn't have any holes or known as ostia. So it is closed because from end of the arteries and capillaries, there is no opening. Okay. So here in open circulatory system, the circulating fluid or hemolymph does not passes through the enclosed tubes. Instead, it is pumped by the heart to a network of channels and cavities throughout the body. So it is also through the network of channels and cavities where gas exchange takes place. So all organisms or animals that portray open circulatory system are mollusks and arthropods. So the purpose of their heart is just to pump blood, and then after that, it will not be recirculated or transported by their veins. So they have an ostia or opening holes on their heart, so it will freely enter the heart to pump again the blood. So the closed circulatory system, on the other hand, it is a system wherein the blood or circulating fluid passes within blood vessels that transported blood away and back to the heart. So it is uh, the blood is transported away by the arteries and then veins toward the heart. So let's start with the human transport system, which is the circulatory system. The first organ is heart. So the heart or the human heart is a muscular organ that all all over pumps blood to all parts of the body. So the adult heart is about the size of your fist. So the average lifespan of a person, the heart beats around 2.5 billion times without interruption, even though when we are sleeping. So for every minute, a normal adult's heart beat around 72 times and pumps blood around 5.5 liters of blood. So that's how blood work for the circulatory system. So it pumps continuously. It can be fast as when you run or slow as when you are sleeping. The heart can beat 3 times as fast as the normal rate as strenuous activities or exercises when you get overexcited. So, for example, 180 to 195 beats per minute. So, it depends on the activity that you are doing. Let's proceed to the anatomy and physiology of the heart. So our heart consists of layers. So we have the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. The epicardium is the outer protective layer of the heart. Myocardium is a muscular middle layer responsible for pumping. No? And then we have the endocardium, which is the thin inner layer of the heart. So our heart is composed of a cardiac muscle, which is involuntary. It is described to be striated. So as you can see, it is striated type of muscles with associated of nervous and connective tissue. So the heart has its own capacity, the pericardial cavity, which is known as the pericardial cavity. And the cavity is covered by these different layers, starting with epicardium, myocardium, and then by pericardium. So heart has different chambers. So we have four chambers, and then there is a part wherein it divides from the two sides by a septum. So the heart is consists of four chamber. The left and the right is divided by a septum, while the upper and lower are divided into different chambers, uh, different chambers. So the right side receive the oxygenated blood. Okay, so here is the right side. It received the oxygenated blood collected from the different parts of the body. So it is deoxygenated because all of the oxygen has been used by the different parts of the body, such as muscles. So while the left side, so this one, okay, receive oxygenated blood from the lungs. So remember our discussion from the respiratory system. So the lungs is responsible for diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the alveoli. So all of the oxygenated blood will be collected from the capillaries uh, towards the heart. So the left side will be the one who receive that oxygenated or blood rich in oxygen. So the upper chamber, okay, here is the upper chamber, is called as atria, while the lower chamber is called ventricles. Okay, one-way valve are called atrioventricular valves that are located between the upper and lower chamber. So the atrium or the atria is a chamber responsible for receiving blood from the different body parts and from the lungs, while the ventricles are responsible for pumping the blood. It's either toward the different body parts or pumping blood towards the lungs. Okay, so the flow of blood to the heart begins with non-oxygenated blood, which came from the different parts of the body, entering the superior and inferior vena cava. So singular for that is vena cava, and filled our right atrium. Okay, so this causes the tricuspid valve, which is found between the right atrium and right ventricle, to open, bringing blood to the right ventricle. So first, from different body parts, followed by the superior and inferior vena cava, received by right atrium, it will pump, and then the tricuspid valve will open. The blood will flow towards the right ventricle. So the right ventricle will pump the blood. So before it pump the blood, the tricuspid valve will close. For the it is important for the tricuspid valve to close to prevent any backflow of a blood. So the valve closes when blood reaches the right ventricle to prevent the backflow or the regurgitation. So from that right ventricle, it will pump to the blood to the pulmonary arteries. So uh, there is a acronym for you to remember, uh, all of the arteries are responsible for pumping blood away from the heart, except for coronary artery, because coronary arteries are artery responsible for pumping toward for the supply of the heart itself. But all of the arteries, the purpose of them is to transport blood away from the heart. So the pulmonary arteries, from the word itself, pulmonary refers to the lungs. Okay, so the pulmonary arteries and then flow to the capillaries of the air sacs in the lungs. So here, the blood give off oxygen and some water, give up oxygen and some water and takes in oxygen. This is where the internal respiration happens. The carbon dioxide and oxygen diffusion. Okay, so all of the deoxygenated blood will be filled with oxygen, and the carbon dioxide will be exhaled through the respiration. So once the oxygenated blood, so from deoxygenated, it will become oxygenated, the blood flows to the pulmonary veins. So veins is towards all of the veins, the transport is towards the heart. So the pulmonary veins will be used for the blood to travel into the left atrium. So the left atrium, with pressure build up, it will be filled, and then the mitral valve is the one that separates the left atrium and left ventricle, which is located between the two chambers. So it will open, and the oxygenated blood will pump into the left ventricles. So again, once the chamber or the left ventricle is filled up, it will close to prevent any regurgitation or backflow of the blood. So once it is filled, the aortic bulb will open, and then it creates the lub-dub sounds. Okay, through the opening and closing of the valves, it creates the specific sound known as the lub-dub sounds that we can hear using the stethoscope. So it is the sound produced by heart during the contraction and relaxation. The lob sound is caused by closing of our atrioventricular valves during the ventricular contraction. So when the ventricles are filled with blood, because it forces the blood to the sinoventricular valves that creates the lob sounds. So while the dub sound is caused by snapping sound of the sinoventricular valve as blood move from the ventricles to the atria. So it is known as the systemic circulation begins when oxygenated blood is delivered from the aorta to different parts of the body. Okay, so let's recall the flow of blood. Okay, so first, the blood, the oxygenated blood will flow in the superior and inferior vena cava. It will enter the right atrium, so it will be filled with blood. And then after that, the tricuspid valve will close once the right ventricle is filled with blood. And then after that, this right ventricle will pump blood towards the lungs, and it will uses the pulmonary arteries. So here in the lungs, the left and the right lungs will receive the oxygenated blood, and diffuses them with oxygen. So once the blood become rich in oxygen, ayan, once it was rich in oxygen, the pulmonary veins, ayan, will collect the blood and then transported it here at our left atrium. So the left atrium will pump the blood. So the bicuspid valve will open and fill the left ventricle. So once it is filled, the left ventricle will pump it, and then the blood will transported in the aortic valve. So here is the aortic valve, and then the aortic valve will distribute all the blood rich in oxygen towards the different uh, body parts. Okay. So, what is blood? So, blood is the internal circulating medium of human body, which is the main function of blood is to carry nutrients and oxygen to the cells of the body and carry away waste products such as carbon dioxide and nitrogenous waste from our body cells. So, the blood consists of 55% of the plasma. The liquid part is 45% blood cells or formed elements. The formed elements are erythrocytes. Okay. These are the red blood cells or RBC, and also transported by leukocytes. Okay. The 1%. Leukocytes are the WBC or white blood cells responsible for the defense and immunity of our body, and the other remaining component is platelets. Okay, so what is blood platelets? Blood platelet is also known as thrombocytes. They are essential for blood clotting. So as you can see here in our PowerPoint, this is the formation of blood clot. So plasma is composed of water, protein, electrolytes, and other substances. So when the cell receives nourishment from dissolved substances, it is carried in the plasma. So the yellow thing, yellow substance, that is the plasma. These substances includes mineral, vitamins, amino acid, and glucose, which are absorbed during the process of digestion, and it is transported to the cells. So uh, it can also transport waste materials to the excretory system for the excretion. So we have different blood vessels. So the blood vessel known as the highway of our circulatory system. So it serves as a path or highway through the blood which blood is circulated in the body. So we have three blood vessels: the arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, so this is the similarities and differences between the capillaries, veins, and artery. So as you can observe, artery has the thickest layer, followed by veins, and the thinnest is capillary because it is the smallest. The uh, artery and vein consists of smooth muscle, endothelial cells, and elastin as well as collagen. Same with veins. While capillaries, it is only consists of endothelial cells. So it is designed to be like that because capillaries is responsible for diffusion. So it doesn't need extra layer because capillary is responsible for diffusion of waste, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. While the other two blood vessels have thicker layers, because uh, they need to pump blood throughout the body towards and away from the heart. So first, the arteries. Arteries are thick walled vessels which allow the passage of oxygenated blood except the pulmonary artery. So their thick walls help to counteract the pressure exerted on them by contraction of the heart muscle. So the largest artery in the body is aorta. Aorta is the only artery that leads out of the left ventricle. The next one is veins. So veins are thin wall vessels compared to the arteries which carry non-oxygenated blood. So it is one of the reason why it is much thinner compared to the arteries. So it carries non-oxygenated blood. There are two large veins in our body, which are the superior and inferior vena cava. So they are the responsible for transporting blood to the right atrium. And then lastly is the capillary, which are very thin, only made up of one layer of cells, which is the endothelial cells. The blood vessels serve as the site of diffusion of materials between blood and cells for exchange. So this is capillaries. Okay, so they are like network of small blood vessels. So the capillaries is the thinnest blood vessels because they are very thin, ready for the fusion of materials across their cells. So it was readily can take place. So from higher concentration to lower concentration. So capillaries which stick an artery to the vein, link to the artery to a vein, also supply brain with oxygen which keep a person conscious. So this is a continuous cyclic process as long as the person lives. And then we have valves. So valves is described to be plugs of tissue that prevent the backflow or regurgitation of our blood during the pumping of blood in our heart. So these are located between different chambers of our heart, such as atrium and ventricles. So um, at the base of the artery that are attached to the heart. So the closure of the bulbs is the one that create a sound known as the lub dub. So as auscultation is a medical term for the act of listening to interval sounds of the body that usually uses of stethoscope. So these are the bulbs. So as you can see, it is known as tricuspid bulb because have three uh, tissue attached here in ventricles, and this is bicuspid or also known as mitral bulb. Ayan. Because it consists only two, and this is the pulmonary valve, and behind, okay, we have the aortic valves. So valves can also be found in large veins along the lower extremities to prevent the backflow of blood. So the heart valve are bicuspid, tricuspid, and aortic valve. So this is the valve in veins. Okay, so let's go back here. Ayan. So this is the valve. But it doesn't it also used for finding pulse rate. So we have different veins, okay, location where we can feel the pulse rate. So from arm, from neck, from the femur. Okay, so those are the different location. Okay, so the pattern of circulation. Okay, so thanks to William Harvey, who is the first uh, person or scientists showed that the heart and blood vessels form a continuous closed type of circulation. So, blood circulation is the body can be divided into pulmonary and systemic. So, when we say pulmonary circulation, that is termed when the blood flows toward the lungs, while systemic is the process wherein the oxygenated blood will be transported to the different body parts and uh, collect all the deoxygenated blood towards the heart. So the difference of pulmonary and systemic circulation. So here, pulmonary circulation, this involves circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs. So the function is the right side of it is the function on the right side from the right atrium, right ventricle to the pulmonary arteries and lungs. So it carries the oxygenated blood to the heart to receive oxygen for the uh, diffusion. So it begins on the right ventricle and ends with the left auricle or ventricle. It returns it returns oxygenated blood back to the heart. So you that is the purpose of pulmonary circulation. On the other hand, we have systemic. This involves circulation of blood between the heart and body organ except the lungs. So it is the function for the left side of the heart. So the left atrium and left ventricle. It carries oxygenated blood to the different body parts. So it starts with the left ventricle and ends with the right auricle or atrium. It develops or it returns the oxygenated blood to the heart. So here is the summary for the flows or pattern of blood circulation. So we will start at the right atrium, which receives the oxygenated blood. So it will open the tricuspid valve. It will fill the right atrium. Therefore, the tricuspid valve will close. Therefore, it will pump the blood and open the pulmonary valve. Here, the pulmonary trunk and pulmonary artery will receive the blood and transported it into the lungs. So here in the pulmonary capillaries, blood will loses carbon dioxide and will gain oxygen through the diffusion. So once the blood is rich in oxygen, the pulmonary veins will receive the oxygenated blood, and then the left atrium will be filled with blood and it will pump blood, will open the bicuspid valve. It will fill the left ventricle. So once the left ventricle is filled with blood, bicuspid valve will close and the aortic valve will open to receive the oxygenated blood, and it will transported via aorta, which is the start for the uh, transportation of blood towards the different body parts. So once the blood reaches the systemic capillaries, it will loses oxygen and again gain carbon dioxide. Therefore, it will be collected and transported within the superior interior vena cava and coronary sinus towards the right atrium. So the flow will repeat itself. Okay, so this is the pathway of blood. So that's for our continuation of lesson number 2.